once you find the people who should lead the movement, what is the next step that you think is the most crucial in starting a movement? Because the thing is that there's many different niches and different movements too.
Mm-hmm.
So how in your mind do we start or choose which topic to take on, or do we take them all on? What do you say?
I'll answer this question in terms of force to vote, because I don't think many people know this, but I helped to organize it. And this was before I was doing this. What happened was that at that time, I was watching Jackson Hinkle at that time. The whole force to vote thing was going on. He made the call on his show at that time that he wanted to come to DC to protest. I told him through a super chat, if you're serious about it, if you're able to come to DC, I will host you. He took me up on my word. I had to get the permit. So I still have the permit. The permit is in my name for that force to vote protest at that time.
Okay.
What happened was at that time, there were DSA members there.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing that they were saying to me, and this was the thing that I wish we kind of discussed a little more with that interview with Cenk. And this is something that, and when I watched your clip on this, Sabi, it made me kind of reflect on that time and what we were doing at that time. I think what we were doing, I thought was a good thing. The one thing I think in going back, I should have done, or maybe we should have done at that point, was when I talked with the DSA members who came to that rally, they were very disappointed with their leadership and the stance that they were taking, because the leadership did not want to follow through in pushing the squad and what they wanted to do. This was the members, not their leadership. So let's make that distinction. The members wanted the squad, to force the vote. It was the leadership that didn't. And so if I were to do it again, we should have involved DSA in terms of the members who are willing to do the work. So since it was in their bylaws to force the vote, they should have been the ones to implement it. And what we should have done in independent media was help elevate the members of DSA and then support them in that work. We kind of took that on. And so because of that, DSA had nothing to do with it, the membership, the leadership. They distanced themselves from that because they wanted access. And it would just left the members kind of like, we'll try and do what we can, but, the leadership is not with this. So it just kind of fell flat after that. So again, all that to say is, once you identify the people, listen to them, because generally they know what the issues are. And sometimes, depending if they're organized, they might have a plan as to how they're able to get what they need. So I think just even in that, it takes a lot more listening and a lot more collaboration versus just hearing the issue and being like, okay, I'm going to take this issue and kind of run with it. Involve the people and see what can be done, who's going to take on what issue, and how, like, strategize as to what needs to be done. But it has to be in the context of the people who are involved. And I think looking back, we didn't do that. So that's kind of the reflection that I had to have in terms of what we did for Force to Vote back then. But that's what I'm saying to people now, especially since I do this, you have to ask how the people who are doing it, how they want to proceed.
That's interesting. I just want to add really quick. That's interesting, Colin. I think a lot of people may not even realize the ground action in reference to force the vote. I feel like that kind of was overshadowed,
Yeah. So thank you very much for that as well. So to you, Colin, I'm sorry, Eric, What my same question to you in regards to what is the next step in choosing which movement, or do you choose them all?
Yeah, well, I mean, we're in a very different place now than we were with Force the Vote. There was actually this hope that the squad would actually do something for us and that they're on our side. And I think at this point, among, those of us that I would characterize as on the real left around here, we know that basically every Democrat and every Republican in Congress or in the government right now are our enemy. Essentially, it's basically, they don't represent us. And so, it is a very different thing now. And there's and someone like Cenk, I mean, it's we all know, that he's basically on the wrong side of this. He's cosplaying as a progressive. What I think of is the way that the Free Palestine movement is running now. In my view, what's happened is this issue is just so overwhelming and just so clear and as a demand, and thousands of unalived kids will do that it overwhelms kind of everything else, and people get in the streets over it. It's and you almost don't need leaders, right? It's kind of come through all this like a wave. Mm-hmm. I'm wondering if there's a way that we could get that kind of a spark and connect into that, but into something bigger, into something that, my thing is always the money and corruption, right? That if you look at why everything is so terrible right now and our government is so bad, it's, they don't represent us. They represent, the billionaire class and the corporations and all that. So I feel like if we could find a way to have that kind of a spark about money and corruption and basically cleaning it up and actually having a real democracy, having a real government that works for us and isn't totally, deeply and implacably corrupt. If we could turn that into a movement, I feel like it's, again, like the Palestine one, maybe it doesn't need leaders, or it doesn't, need all these podcaster leaders or something. That would be my take on it.
Okay. But I will say, in reference to the Palestine issue, we have to remember they started doing protests that week, like the week after, actually the day after October 7th, there were protests that weekend. So even before the death toll started to reach a couple thousand, people were already out in the streets. And I think that's just because people were, again, a lot of young people are very much aware of how the Palestinian people have been treated. So the desire to get out in the streets was already there. And I think that after, Gaza was attacked after October 7th, that was like, honestly, the red button to push. And people were like, nope, we got to get out in the streets. This is ridiculous. It's not the first time there's been a pro-Palestinian protest, but even before that death toll was high, the numbers were already there out in the streets. Same thing when PSL and Answer Coalition held that anti-war rally in DC in last February. I think, Afeni, I think you were at that. They had thousands of people out in the streets. So it's obvious there's something that those two organizations are really good at. They're really good at getting the word out and getting the people out in the streets and providing the transportation for people to get there. Yeah.
So just to extend this question to you, Afeni, how do people start? Do they go with just a niche one? By niche, I mean more focused, or do they just go broad spectrum as far as choosing what to do, mutual aid or action on the ground with?
Yeah, I mean, I think that that's a really important question because, like, let's be real, Force the Vote came and went. You feel me? And many working class folks don't even know about that discourse. Folks can't pay their rent. Folks, groceries is high, and niggas can't get a good job with some good wages. You feel me? So, like, when I think about what is necessary in this moment, I think it's really important for us to ask the real questions of how do we interrupt the propaganda that keeps allowing Joe Biden to win primaries? How do we interrupt that cycle? Because it's not that our folks are not aware of what issues affect them. Even like I will say, I'm very politically engaged. I've never been polled. I vote in midterms and everything, primaries. I've never been polled, so I don't know who the hell they talking to. But from what we can see, the folks that they are talking to, a lot of them support a ceasefire. A lot of them support Medicare for all. A lot of them support bringing home some of that war funding and actually spending it on domestic funding. A lot of them support a better, improved infrastructure. A lot of folks support a higher minimum wage. So how do we fill that disconnect between what people want and what is actually happening? And that's when you get into spaces like mutual aid. That is when you get into spaces like, what does it look like for us to build dual power and to build and to organize autonomy for our communities? So that way they don't have to be as reliant on government services or on even just participating in the duopoly in the first place, participating in the farce of democracy in the first place. So I think a lot of it starts with even on that very niche level of just getting to know who is in your community. If your neighbors just had a baby, go bring them some diapers. Just get to know them. If there is an elderly person down the street, figure out, hey, what days do you go get your medicine? Can I fill in some of that time for you? And can I go to the pharmacy for you? Stuff like that. Relationship building is where we need to start. And yes, it seems really minuscule, and it seems really inconsequential. But let me tell you something. I trust Sabby. And if I call Sabby right now and say, hey, shit about to hit the fan, yada, 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 I know Sabby's going to move. And I know that because Sabby and I are in relationship. We actually know each other. And I think that's a lot of it. We're asking ourselves to participate in things and do things that we are literally societally not ready for. Because you can't say that you want to do the thing, but you don't want to talk to nobody. You can't say that you want to do the thing, but you don't even know who live next door to you. If you live in an apartment complex, there's no reason you don't know at least 3 people that's on your floor. You know what I'm saying? And it's little stuff like that. You can't do the mutual aid if you don't know what folks need. You can't. And I think also as organizers, we have to step back and we have to look at what our part is in this. Because I'm going to be real with you. The nonprofit industrial complex is industrial and it's complexing. Okay. Every little bit of money that I have seen, every grant that I see, every organization that I'm in space with right now, everyone is, well, how are we going to get out the vote? How are we going to do voter registration? How are we going to do this? How are we going to do that? And in a way, I get it, because the nonprofit industrial complex, it is designed and tailored to make us literally run on the hamster wheel. So it's I understand it to a certain extent how people get caught in well, I'm doing this nonprofit work, so I know that I'm doing something. I'm doing something to actually build towards it. But actually what you're doing is you're participating in yet another state-sponsored program that does nothing but actually uphold what they have going on here. It does not, there's no threats, because let me tell you, as soon as you become a threat, they pull funding. It happened to an organization that organizes out here in Maryland. It's called CASA. CASA is a immigration rights and housing organization. It's also national, but they have local pockets. And that's the last time I'm going to say for real. But CASA came out in support of a ceasefire, I think in November or something like that, or maybe even December. And a funder, a philanthropist in Maryland, pulled $150,000 from them. Staff, people's livelihoods gone. So do I understand to a certain extent how people get caught in this rigmarole because you want to do the right thing, you want to be in these spaces, you want to build, you want to do that stuff? Absolutely. And also, as organizers, how long can we run on the hamster wheel? What sacrifices are we willing to make to actually get people to the place that they need to be to participate in a system, in a more autonomous system, to participate in dual power and direct democracy? What role are we playing in actually getting people there? So I think about, I honestly, I think about this a lot, and we're in like a lot of the national spaces that I'm in. We do a lot of talking and strategizing. And to a certain extent, I know this is not gonna be the most popular thing to say, but I'm fixing to say it. To a certain extent, do I believe that we have to have some buy-in to the electoral system? Yes, maybe, just a little bit. But should that be a lion's share of where our energy goes? Hell no. But that's just how everything is set up right now. And I think that's what the most frustrating part of it is for me as somebody who does organizing work full time, all the time, is that how do we break out of that and also like keep the movement afloat at the same time?
That's a good point. I'm glad you brought up mutual aid as well, Afeni, because the reality is, as much as we talk about unionizing and we talk about people going on strike, that's not done without mutual aid. They already established mutual aid so that they can feed each other. They have food for the weeks that they're on strike so that they can pay their bills while they're on strike. A lot of people may not realize that, but mutual aid is also a part of that as well. And I think Terry Hinton might be in the chat. Terry's a part of the RBN Boston chapter. Terry will tell you, we meet. Sometimes we meet in person as a group. Sometimes we meet virtually. But when we do these events, it just doesn't come out of anywhere. Like we actively meet and strategize and come up with different ideas and how we can help people. But I think the big thing is what Afeni said earlier, is that you have to know what the community needs. And if you're not talking to people in the community, you're not going to know what they need. That means you may have to hop off of social media for a bit and actually go talk to people in person, because I think that there's too much time spent on social media and not enough time spent out in these streets. I see some people, I'm like, I don't know how in the world. I see sometimes people put out a tweet like every hour. I'm like, where is you? Where are you? What are you doing?
Yeah.
I will say this, Savvy. On the flip of that, sometimes being on independent media can help you kind of figure out what those issues are. For example, with the organization that I'm with, one of the things that kind of came up is one of our legislators in DC is proposing a child tax credit for residents in DC. So as a teacher-based organization, my boss basically asked us, do you think that we should, promote this as an organization? And immediately we said yes. So then the next thing was he figured to send me to Atlanta to learn more about what's happening regarding child tax credits in other states. But I would have been as fervent to actually do it if it wasn't for me being in independent media, and more especially, RBN, because I know you've had conversations about child tax credits on past shows. And I know I've also talked about child tax credits on my show. So that's why I'm saying, being in independent media in certain places, I think there can be ways where independent media where we can give the information so that when these things pop up locally on a statewide, you can be like, oh, I've heard this from this channel or whatever. Let me go down to the local level, or at least try and connect with people on the local level and find out more. So I don't want to disclude independent media in that, because I think there is a space for us for that. But I think it's just a question of what we're talking about that will help people kind of be like, oh, I heard this from Sabby, or I heard this from JB, or I heard this from Afeni. Is there anything I can do in my town or my city that we can maybe have something like this? So I think it also matters in what our content is, to help people kind of realize what opportunities are available or what is possible in terms of having that kind of to help build that kind of organizing on the ground.
Yeah, Charlie's a part of the chapter too. Hi, Charlie. Sorry.
So, you know what? This is also all really good points. One of the questions I had, and I'll just say this: I was actually looking for it, but someone brought out a TikTok, and they were talking about how we have to be careful about mutual aid in a sense where we don't want to be doing mutual aid to keep capitalism afloat.
Right.
And so it's like, are you just keeping things along so that people can keep going within this system? Or are you using mutual aid in such a way where it actually builds that dual power so that we can walk away from capitalism? And I just want to give a shout out to former RBN member Kamali, because the first time I ever heard dual power was from him.
Yep.
And so when I heard that, I was like, what in the world is that? And then he educated me on what dual power is. This is what will make you dangerous to the powers that be. Is building something, an alternative to a system that does not exploit you. And that is what you need to be. You need to be dangerous in a sense where you are helpful to the people, but you are dangerous to an exploitative system.